Hello, chosen being. Welcome back. They'll never tell you this, but deep down, a narcissist is terrified of losing you. On the surface, they act untouchable, confident, even arrogant, as if they could replace you at any moment. But behind that mask, there's a quiet panic. What happens when the person who carried me, forgave me, endured me, finally leaves? It reminds me of something I once saw in a relationship close to me. He would criticize her constantly, making her feel like she wasn't enough. Yet whenever she pulled away, he would come running, desperate, suddenly soft, promising change. That wasn't love, it was fear. Fear of losing the supply of validation, comfort, and strength she provided. Because here's the truth. You bring something into their life they cannot create for themselves. Your compassion, your patience, your ability to see good where others see nothing. These qualities are their lifeline. Without you, they would have to face themselves. And that's the one thing they cannot bear. Think about it. The narcissist builds an entire world where they're the center, where everyone else rotates around them. But in reality, their world only spins because you've been fueling it with your love, your energy, your forgiveness. If you walk away, the foundation cracks. Spiritually, why is losing you their worst fear? Because you are more than just a partner, a friend, or a family member. You are the mirror that reflects their emptiness. As long as you're near, they can avoid their truth. When you leave, they're forced to face the silence inside themselves. And that silence terrifies them. Part 2. Control disguised as love. If you've ever been in a relationship with a narcissist, you'll notice something strange. Their affection always seems tied to control. They don't just say, "I love you," to express love. They say it to keep you hooked, to make you stay, to soften you after they've hurt you. On the surface, it may look like devotion. They call often. They want to know where you are. They demand your attention. But if you look deeper, it's not about love, it's about ownership. I remember seeing this in someone I cared about deeply. Whenever she tried to set boundaries, he'd immediately flip the script. He would tell her, "If you really loved me, you'd answer my calls no matter what. You're the only one who understands me. Without you, I'd be lost." It sounded like romance at first, but it was really a chain disguised as a promise. And this is why losing you terrifies them. Because once you step out of that control, they lose their ability to disguise possession as love. They lose their grip on the very thing that gave them power. Spiritually, you need to understand this. What they call love is often dependency. They need your light to function. They need your forgiveness to feel secure. They need your presence to avoid facing their own emptiness. But real love doesn't chain you. Real love doesn't demand you shrink. Real love doesn't keep you in fear of walking away. And when you begin to recognize the difference, their entire system begins to collapse. Have you ever noticed how panicked they get when you go quiet? When you stop responding to every text? When you don't play into their games? When you reclaim your silence, they spiral. That panic isn't about missing you the way healthy love misses someone. It's about losing control. And here's the part they'll never admit. The moment you see through their disguise, the mask slips. They realize they can't keep you with false promises anymore. And that's why losing you is their worst fear. Because once you break free, they can no longer disguise control as love. They can no longer claim ownership over your soul. Part 3. The fear of irrelevance. For a narcissist, being at the center of your world is everything. They thrive on being the sun, expecting you to orbit around them like a planet, constantly feeding them attention, admiration, and energy. But what happens when you stop orbiting? When you build your own life, your own light, your own strength? That's when their deepest fear begins to surface. Because your independence makes them irrelevant. I've witnessed this firsthand. A friend of mine was once so entangled in a narcissistic relationship that she couldn't make the simplest decision without asking his opinion. What to wear, who to call, even what to eat. But the day she began making choices for herself, signing up for a class, reconnecting with her old hobbies, I watched panic take over him. Suddenly, he was suspicious, controlling, questioning everything she did. Why? Because her independence meant he was no longer her only source of validation. And that's the nightmare for a narcissist: irrelevance. Spiritually, narcissists fear being forgotten. They fear losing the role of puppet master, the constant supply of your attention. They fear silence, because silence means they don't matter anymore. But here's the part that's empowering for you. Every step you take toward independence is a broken chain. Every moment you choose yourself, your dreams, your peace, your joy, you shrink their power. Have you ever noticed how they react when you succeed without them? When you celebrate something they had no hand in, they may dismiss it, downplay it, or even sabotage it. Not because your success is small, but because your success proves you don't need them to shine. And spiritually, that's the truth they cannot accept. You were never meant to revolve around them. You were always meant to rise on your own. This is why losing you terrifies them so deeply. Because without you, they are forced to confront a reality they spend their whole life running from: that they are not the center, that they are not the source, that their worth depends on someone else's light. And when that light walks away, they are left in the dark. So when you begin to reclaim your independence, don't mistake their panic for love. It's not love, it's fear. Fear of becoming irrelevant in the story of your life. Part 4. The Mirror of Truth. There's something powerful about your presence that a narcissist both craves and fears. You act as a mirror, not because you reflect their greatness, but because you reflect their truth. You have qualities they secretly wish they had: authenticity, compassion, resilience, and the ability to love without hidden motives. When they look at you, they see everything they lack, and that's both intoxicating and unbearable for them. I remember someone once telling me about her experience with a narcissistic partner. She said, "Whenever I was strong, he became cruel. Whenever I was vulnerable, he became cold. It was like my very existence triggered something in him." And it did, because her light exposed his shadows. This is the real reason losing you is their worst fear. Because when you're around, they can at least use you as a distraction from their emptiness. But when you're gone, they are left with nothing but their own reflection. Unfiltered, undeniable, inescapable. And here's what makes it worse for them. Once you leave, they can't blame you anymore. They can't project onto you, twist your words, or gaslight you into doubting yourself. All they have left is themselves. And that is the one person they've been running from all along. Spiritually, your presence is a mirror of truth. Your absence is the removal of excuses. That's why they panic when they feel you slipping away. That's why they fight so hard to keep you bound. Not because they love you, but because they fear themselves. Think about it. Every time you stood your ground, every time you refused to play their game, every time you chose honesty over manipulation, you reminded them of the truth they hide from. That truth is unbearable for them. And that's why losing you shakes them so deeply. Because once the mirror is gone, they are left staring at the emptiness they've spent their life covering up with lies, control, and masks. Part 5. The Collapse of Their Control. A narcissist builds their entire world on control. Control of conversations, control of emotions, control of your decisions, your boundaries, even your perception of reality. As long as they hold that control, they feel powerful. But what happens when you step out of their grasp? When you stop playing their games, stop feeding their ego, stop bending yourself to fit their moods, their entire system begins to collapse. I've seen this happen more than once. A woman I once knew had been under the thumb of a narcissistic partner for years. He dictated everything: when she could go out, who she could speak to, even how she dressed. But the day she started saying no, the day she started quietly reclaiming her life, he unraveled. His anger turned desperate. His arrogance turned into begging. His cruelty turned into panic. Why? Because the chains he thought were unbreakable snapped right before his eyes. Spiritually, this is where their fear of losing you becomes undeniable. They're not afraid of you leaving in the physical sense alone. They're afraid of the collapse of their entire illusion of power. When you walk away, they lose the audience for their performance. They lose the scapegoat for their mistakes. They lose the shield that kept their emptiness hidden. And without those things, their carefully built tower crumbles. Think about it. How many times have you seen a narcissist go into overdrive the moment you begin to detach? Suddenly, they call constantly. They make promises they never made before. They may even act like the person you first fell for. But it's not real. It's desperation. Because your freedom means the end of their control. And here's the powerful truth. Once their control collapses, so does their illusion of superiority. They can no longer convince themselves they're untouchable, irreplaceable, or godlike. Losing you forces them to face what they've always known deep down, that their power was never real. It only existed because you allowed it. That's why losing you is their worst fear, because when you rise, their empire falls. By now, you see it clearly. Losing you is the narcissist's greatest fear, not because of love, not because of care, but because your presence held their world together. Your departure shatters their illusion. But here's where I want to leave you with something empowering. Your bonus tip for staying free. Create a life so rooted in self-love and spiritual truth that no manipulator can ever chain you again. That means building daily practices that keep you grounded in your own identity. Wake up each morning and affirm, I am not defined by anyone's approval. I am enough as I am. Spend time doing things that remind you of your worth. Journaling, meditating, creating, connecting with people who truly see you. Because the stronger your roots in yourself, the harder it is for anyone to uproot you. And don't underestimate the power of silence. You don't always need to fight back, explain, or prove yourself. Sometimes the greatest act of strength is walking away, choosing peace, and letting your silence be louder than their chaos. That silence is not weakness, it's freedom. I want you to remember this. When you walk away from a narcissist, you don't just escape them. You reclaim yourself. You get back your voice, your dreams, your peace. You step out of the role they forced on you and return to the person you were always meant to be. So yes, losing you is their nightmare. But for you, it's the beginning of healing. It's the start of a life where you no longer shrink to make others comfortable, where you no longer carry chains that were never yours to bear. And here's my encouragement. Trust that the universe, God, or whatever higher power you believe in has seen every tear, every struggle, every silent battle. And freedom is not just possible, it's promised. You are stronger than their fear, and your story is not ending, it's just beginning. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share your experience in the comments below. Your words may be the lifeline for someone else walking through the same storm. And as always, chosen being, Protect your light, guard your peace, and never forget, you are the very fear they hoped you'd never become. Free.